Hello, 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 and welcome back to another episode of the Laugh at Pat podcast, #Patchats. The music that you are hearing now is from today's guest, Phlocalyst. Now, I discovered Phlocalyst music in kind of an interesting way. I was scrolling through Instagram, as many of us do, and I saw a sponsored ad of a guy playing the trumpet, and when I turned on the sound, I really dug the music that he was playing. And I've always been really interested and really loved artists who are taking electronic music or making beats and trying to blend that with live instrumentation. So I went and tried to look for him on YouTube, and I found a live set he did for a YouTube channel called Hansi's Room, link in the description below. And I just really fell in love with his music, and so then I started listening to him on Spotify, link also in the description below. And eventually just decided I would reach out to him on Instagram and see if he would be willing to come on the podcast and tell me a little bit about his story, his journey in music, and his take on the creative process and musicality. And so I reached out to him, and he was gracious enough to give me a little bit of his time. And one of the fun things about this interview was I didn't know very much about him going into it. And so in the interview, I actually found out that he was trained from the age of 5 as a classical trumpet player. And his first dream in music was to be an orchestral trumpet player. So we talked about that. We talked about the origins of the Phlocalyst project and just a whole bunch of stuff, his creative process and much, much more. So without further ado, let's get into our conversation. But first, a little bit more of some great music from Phlocalyst and a little video project I put together that I think goes nicely with his music. Enjoy. Awesome. Well, so to get started, thank you, first of all, for taking the time to talk to me. And I think like a good jumping off point is just maybe if you could introduce yourself a little bit for anyone who hasn't, discovered you and your music yet.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Phlocalyst. I'm a trumpet player, and I'm making beats. That's basically it. Yeah.
And where are you from originally?
I'm from Belgium, but living in Munich, Germany right now.
Okay. And so did you start playing trumpet at a young age? When did you begin that?
Yeah, actually I started at 5. So I'm originally from a musician's family, and everyone in the family is like playing music professionally, I would say. And so I was being pushed from a really young age, and yeah, that's how I started.
And so you say you come like kind of from a bit of a musical family. What kind of music was like being played in the home, either on the record player or, instrumentally? Like what kind of stuff what kind of sounds did you grow up around?
I would say classical music and jazz and everything else. I wouldn't say it was forbidden, but classical and jazz were like the things to listen to. Yeah. And that's
Yeah.
the first life years were only with classical and jazz. Yeah.
And in that vein, were you drawn to one of those more than the other? Because I mean, I definitely hear a little like the influence of jazz in your sound, in the music that you're making now, but was that always the case?
I definitely started as a classical trumpet player. Like my father is a classical trombone player, and yeah, he was teaching me always in the very classical way, like trumpet exercises, trying to perfectionize your skill basically. And jazz was, I mean, I was listening to jazz records and I was completely crazy about them, I would say, but I wasn't taught to play jazz at the very beginning. Yeah.
Mm. Did you I'm always interested because like for example myself, I mean I didn't start at 5 and I didn't come from nearly as like a musical family as you, but I think when I was like 7 or 8 was when bands started in school, and at first I started on the clarinet and then the saxophone, and now as an adult I can look back and be like, man, I wish I had just like stuck with it and done my practicing and played my scales and learned it. But as a child, I was just like, I want to go out and play. So did you were you like just was playing scales like super fun for you, or was that something that was a like a discipline you learned from your dad?
Um, yeah, for me it was just a way to learn the instrument. Of course, I mean, I think the first thing I ever played on the trumpet was a C major scale. That's how I started. Was the first, how do you say that, encounterment with my instrument. And
Uh-huh.
after we were starting with some melodies, child songs or whatever, but the scales and the technical exercises were definitely always a big part of my practice routine. Yeah, till today, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, that was something actually I was going to get to later, but since we're talking about it, what is your balance between, like you making beats versus, like practicing the art form of your instrument?
Yeah. Um, I went to conservatory to study trumpet, and so for classical trumpet. And during my studies, I just came onto beats, but it became a thing like 7 8 years ago. Before I was listening to hip hop, but making them myself, I would say that I really started 7 8 years ago, and the practice routine has never had an influence on my producing and the other way around. So yeah, and so the life goal actually before making beats or anything was always to be an orchestral trumpet player, and therefore I had to have this daily practice routine. The beats
What,
were a distraction, I would say,
yeah.
from that goal.
Um, what I mean, as someone who's pretty uneducated in, yeah, like the requirements of being an orchestral player, yeah, I mean, like how many hours a day do you need to be practicing if you want to try to achieve something like that?
Yeah, that's a very personal question.
Oh,
I can
sorry.
remember. No, no. I mean not personal on me, but I mean it's different for every person. Maybe my
I
English is
see.
like
Oh, okay.
not good enough to express, but yeah. And so when I started studying trumpet, when I knew I wanted to become a professional player, I think I was 16, 17. I started practicing 5, 6, maybe 7 hours a day, and I just noticed it was too much. Was destroying my lips, so to say.
Yeah.
And the process of learning to play better went from practicing less and less and less until I found an amount of time that was good for me to progress with. And I would say I built it down to 2-3 hours a day. Yeah.
Yeah. So to go back a little bit more to your childhood, you mentioned, you when you started playing, you were playing a lot of classical music, but you just loved listening to jazz. So who were some of your early favorites to listen to, and were they specifically trumpet players, or were you just all sorts of different varieties of jazz?
Of course, there were trumpet players, but I would say the first guy that really struck me was Carl Fontana. He's a trombone player, jazz trombone player. My father had some records of him, and yeah, I don't remember how old I was, but I loved his way of improvising, and I was just whistling every improvisation with the record. Yeah, I don't know. That was actually the guy that I loved the most, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then you said you at 16 or 17, you kind of decided that you wanted to pursue this dream of being like a professional trumpet player. What was the journey between those 2 points? Were you kind of, obviously you were still practicing a lot, but what was your did you play in school, or were you playing in bands or anything?
Yeah, so there was the practice routine. There were courses in the conservatory, like school orchestra. When I started studying, the first gigs started coming in with all kind of different orchestra. It's like typical when someone is sick, they need a replacement, and then they ask for a student to go and play, and then of course playing auditions, like playing, yeah, every place that is interesting, going there and playing for it, because it's super competitive. It's I think there are, for one audition, for one place in orchestra, there are 30-40 people who are coming there to play for the place and then trying to win it. Yeah. And that was the biggest focus of this journey, from being a trumpet player and being a professional trumpet player.
Yeah. What is that like the first time that you got selected as a student to fill in for someone who's sick? Is that like a nerve-wracking feeling?
Nerve-wracking, dying, like just stressful, super stressful. Yeah. The very first time, of course. I remember one of the very first times I did a big replacement in an orchestra. It was with Ennio Morricone. Do you know him, the film composer?
No, I haven't heard of him.
It's like the guy who wrote the music for example, The Hateful Eight.
Oh wow! Okay.
Or The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Like this. Actually, it was like composing a lot of Western music, I would say. And it was in front of a hall of 20,000 people, I would say. And I was playing third trumpet, so not like a principal role or anything. But I had one small solo in a 2-hour concert, and I was like, the concert from the beginning till that solo, I was just dying for the moment. And luckily I played it well, but it was, as you say, it's unbelievably nerve-wracking.
Yeah. Well, I imagine also in that scenario, like if I were listening to that with an untrained ear, if you made a mistake, I would probably have no idea. But you're sitting with a group of people who have done nothing but train their ears for the smallest.
You want to play there again. Yeah, you want to play there again, and you want them to like you and to invite you. So, that's the stress factor always.
Yeah. Did you ever have an experience where it didn't go well?
Yeah. I have one that I will remember forever. I was in the final of a competition in France, and I had to go on stage and was like incredibly hot. And I can show it. Like, wait, I'm gonna take my trumpet and show something.
Yeah, please.
The trumpet has these valves.
Yeah.
See? And so, for them to always work, they need oil. So you need to put oil on them once every 2 weeks, I would say. Yeah. And before this final, I was maybe nervous, and I forgot about it. And yeah, during my play, one valve got stuck, and it went completely wrong, and it was horrible.
Oh no. So I mean, if one valve gets stuck, I mean, it's not because there's not so many. It's not like the clarinet or the saxophone or something where there's like a lot of buttons. So I imagine if like one valve gets stuck, that's a huge range that you're missing now as far as what you can do.
Exactly, because there are different range types that we are making with the lips, and every lip range has the same finger combination. If I would explain it very fast.
Yeah.
Has the same row of combinations that you can make with the valves, and so if one valve gets stuck, you are screwed in every range, so to say.
Yeah. Well, so then when did you start, because you're beginning, you were listening to a lot of jazz, you're playing a lot of classical music. At what point did you start getting exposed to, hip hop or electronic music or, other genres of music?
Yeah. I had this friend that once transferred me a huge file of a huge folder of music. I'd never listened through all of the albums, but one album I discovered was one of the first albums I discovered in there, and it was Pete Rock, this very legendary hip hop producer, and this it's with I&I. It's called Center of Attention, the album, and I was just hooked to the sound, I would say. Yeah. And so the very first time I tried to make a beat was actually just a copy of a beat of this album.
And so yeah, that I wanted to ask about, like, so you listened to that and you just thought like, oh, it would be fun to try to recreate that, or like how did you come to? I mean, you mentioned that beats kind of started as a little bit of a distraction.
Yeah, that's true. I just heard the sound and I thought, I think I can make this. I can make beats of like this type of beats. I mean, of course, the idea is always key. And so for him, for example, a producer like Pete Rock to come up with a sound like that is always unique. So recreating will never come anything close to that. But I thought, like, I love this sound. Let's try something new with it. And to get to something new, I first should know the basics and know how to make this type of music.
Mm-hmm. And so how did the progression go? Like from the start, did you think, oh, it would be fun to incorporate like playing the trumpet with the beats that I'm making? Or did it just start as like, oh, this is another kind of creative outlet?
No, I think from the beginning I have played trumpet over them. In the beginning I was fooling around a bit with chords, but I had this iPad program, so it wasn't. It was a Fruity Loops producing program on iPad, so it wasn't something expanded or anything, or at least not the version I had. And I just tried around and incorporated the trumpet. And after I had a while, I think it was maybe a year, where I worked more with samples. So I was like digging samples or cutting old jazz records and putting beats over them, because I mean, if you get into that type of music and you know how to do it, it's so much fun. And later after that I switched back to making stuff myself.
Yeah, I imagine also with someone with your background, you have like a wealth of knowledge of potential tracks and artists that you could sample.
But you always have to be careful. I think in the lo-fi or beat scene there is a lot of how would I say that? there are a lot of unknown things going on. I mean, I can't see anymore which track is cleared and which not, and actually it doesn't matter when the track is nice. The idea counts, but there's always a risk with non-cleared samples.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So here, this might be, like, no, you're good. Yeah. So something else I wanted to ask you about is, basically, like lo-fi beats, and also this kind of, mix of like hip hop, jazz sound is something that like I kind of first got exposed to growing up, in the States. And, so I just was wondering, and maybe this is also because I'm in a bit of the Berlin like techno bubble, but it's not like a sound that I'm as familiar with hearing over here. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, what that scene is like here. Is it kind of a smaller scene? Is it up and coming, or am I just not knowledgeable enough?
First of all, when I'm checking, or when I would check statistics and see in which town or city people are listening to my music, Berlin is always up there. So I would say top 5 maybe, no idea. The beat scene is definitely very represented in Germany, because also a lot of incredible beat makers are from Germany, and then especially lo-fi beat makers. So yeah, a lot of the people you're gonna hear in these lo-fi playlists or beat tapes are from Germany.
Okay, interesting. And so also, what, like, now, obviously, so you're still pursuing this, dream of playing orchestral trumpet, but also, I mean, like, the stuff that you're putting out now, from what I've seen of the numbers on Spotify, for example, are like quite successful. How do you balance that? Is the Phlocalyst project still just kind of like a side project distraction, or is that starting to come more into your main focus?
Thing is, I have actually realized the dream of becoming an orchestral trumpet player almost 2 years ago. So I have like a place in Orchestra for life now.
Oh, really?
And that's
Okay.
and that's like really that's really the biggest. That was, I think, one of the biggest relief of my life. That's how you say it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And before I had some contracts in a different orchestra, and this one now is it's really something fixed. It's great. I love my working space. And the beat thing next to it is also going very well. So yeah, professionally, I'm very, very happy at the moment. Yeah.
So how does that work? When you get in with an orchestra, it's a lifetime. Is that normal that it's a lifetime position somehow?
I mean, that's the thing the classical musician is somehow aiming for, because to get like a lifelong stability, like to live from your music or from playing music. And it depends where you are playing or what you are playing for. There are auditions for a year contract, for a 5-year contract, for a lifelong contract, and yeah, it depends where you are auditioning and what the place is called. Yeah.
Yeah. And so is that how you ended up in Munich, or did that happen before?
No, I've studied here before, and then I had a 1-year contract in an orchestra in Braunschweig, in an opera orchestra, and then I auditioned in Munich again, and now I'm here again. So yeah.
Okay. And so what does your dad, think of the beat side of your music? Obviously, he must be very happy for you, with your orchestral position, but yeah, what have you like? Do you have any memories of like sharing your first beats that you made with him or anything like that?
Yeah, for like he's definitely proud. It's funny that you're asking these questions because they're like, you know, um, but it was a struggle for the way to get a place, and then in between, how would I say that? That's like a very long story I cannot put into one conversation. But he was always supporting me to the fullest, and he, of course, he wanted me to have that place, and he always believed in it. And when I was then showing the beats, in the middle of the road, I would say, like between being a student and being in an orchestra, at first he wasn't very fond of it, I would say, but very fast he started loving it. He just started being into that world of lo-fi, loving beats, chilling with instrumental hip hop, which is crazy to me.
Yeah.
And in the end I would say that he's my best friend, and we are getting along on all terms right now.
Oh, that's amazing. That's awesome.
But it was sometimes we had our differences, but like everyone.
Yeah, of course. And do you guys like play together ever, or like when you're at home or something, do you guys like mess around?
Before when I was really young, I think once he wrote a piece because he was always also conducting orchestra, and then he wrote a small piece for the two of us to play solo in front of the orchestra. That's one thing I remember. At home, he was like teaching me for some years, but yeah, I think when I was 16, 17, maybe later, I got some lessons with him. But I said like, I'm done with this teacher-student relationship.
Yeah.
I want to find my own way right now, and it was totally fine.
And have you guys been able to kind of like connect more as peers on a musical level?
I don't understand what you mean.
Like as if you're just both orchestral musicians who have a lot of knowledge and experience playing, rather than a teacher student or father son.
Yeah, right now I try to, how would I say? Of course we talk about music, but I think life itself is more important. Telling about friendship stories or sitting somewhere with a beer and having, shouldn't always be about music. Yeah.
Totally. Well, so something else I wanted to ask you about is like, do you ever play shows as Phlocalyst?
Yeah, I've played a couple of shows, but as I'm like now releasing music since 2.5 years, everything needed to take a bit of a start, I would say. And half a year before Corona started, there were a couple of shows, and we were also having some concert series in Munich,
Mm-hmm.
but all of that stopped right now. This is a shame. That's why I started doing these live sets on YouTube too.
Yeah. And what was that like the first time that you were going to play out and play your beats and stuff? Was that did that kind of take you back to like those first times playing in the orchestra, or do you have so much experience performing at this point that it was not like a nerve-wracking thing?
It was nerve-wracking also because it was in Berlin. If you're from, maybe you know Punk.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was there, and it was just my first DJ gig. I had no idea how to DJ. I got like a 200 euro controller, twisting some knobs and playing some trumpet over it with one of my best friends, Lesky. We were doing this set together, and I remember I think I had to drink 2-3 beers before doing the show because I was like, yeah. And the funny thing is, I've won my first audition 3 days after that. That for me that was crazy. So somehow things came together.
You mean your first audition for the
Classical orchestra.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah, because before I was always like keeping myself together, no drinking for a month before an audition, or like taking care of myself. And then this evening was our first DJ gig, and I was super hyped for it. And I said like, okay, tonight I don't care, let's just do it and have fun. And it was great. And then 3 days after that happened, so completely unreal to me.
Maybe sometimes I think with creativity, there's an element that if you can kind of relax a little bit, that sometimes that's actually the point where you can perform the best. Like speaking of kind of like creativity and stuff, what is when you're like making a song, what is your process? Like, do you get a little idea, or do you hear something that inspires you? What does that look like?
It's always different. Before I was starting with some chords, just playing some chords. Now I'm starting with a drum loop to get a beat before I'm playing in the music, and then just going over the rhythm and see what sounds nice. Or maybe I hear a song and hear something in it that inspires me. That happens too. There are a lot of different possibilities.
And is it something that you like? You know, every day you practice your trumpet, right? Do you take the same approach with making beats, where it's like every day I want to like at least spend an hour messing around with this, or is it more something that you do kind of like when inspiration hits?
In the beginning, I was like really addicted to it because I discovered something new with the producing thing, and then sometimes I have these. It's different. Sometimes I have these periods where I make incredibly a lot of beats, if you can call it like that, and then other days where I'm just like completely drained and not in the mood for it.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm still making music then, but it's not as much fun.
And when you're making a song, do you make the beat with what you're going to do with your trumpet in mind, or do you focus on making the beat first and then figure out the trumpet part afterwards?
Yeah, that's how it goes mostly.
Okay. And you know, also with your kind of like, you know, background with jazz, do you is some of that also why am I blanking on the word now, but like kind of improv, or do you have a kind of set, like do you write out exactly, you know, the trumpet part?
No, most of it comes in the moment. I would also say that, I mean, as I studied classical music, I would still see myself as a classical trumpet player. I have taken some jazz lessons with a really great Munich jazz trumpet player, and he has showed me some stuff. But like to explain shortly, the concept of my trumpet playing on hip hop beats is it should sound jazzy, but I don't want to let it explode too much, because it should still have this samply feeling, sampling hip hop feeling. So a lot of stuff is repetitive. Sometimes it's just a lick that's coming back. Yeah, I think when it becomes too much, it's too much. I don't know how I can say it better. Is that like more fun to play because it's like simple, and so you can kind of like just kind of groove more, or does it sometimes also, like for someone with your skill set, is it sometimes like a little bit boring because it's like simpler? No, it's definitely not boring. I think a lot of times we say in the studio, because we have like our Munich crew, and we always say like less is more, and it's actually just true. It's funny to say it, but yeah, And I had when there's this vibe of the beat and everything, it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah. Um, so do you, because I've noticed like on a lot of your tracks, it seems like they're like collaboration projects. Is that how do you do those types of collaborations? Is that like you guys are in the studio together working on the beats, bouncing ideas off of each other? How does that work?
I would say a lot of things are going over the internet, and that's how my approach from the very beginning was to write to people that made good music or that made a sound that I was getting hyped off, just to see if they were interested in making something together. And that's also where I get most of the motivation from, just from being inspired by other people or just by friendships.
Yeah. Well, I imagine also like I mean, like if I were a producer and someone like yourself came to me, I would be super stoked to work with someone who's like on your level, with the trumpet and everything. So that make
Yeah, I'm like the last 2 weeks were also very cool because I was jamming with my brother in the studio for a
oh,
week.
cool.
It's always awesome to make stuff with him. And then there's also this lo-fi or yeah beat producer No Spirit who was visiting me for he's still there actually. He's already in Munich for a month, and yeah, that was a good
Nice.
experience.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was also something I wanted to ask you about is, some of like the other, um, like DJs and producers that I've talked to, or just artists in general. I mean, how they've dealt with this pandemic over the last year, because I mean, for some of them, they were really earning their living, touring and stuff. I mean, obviously the situation it sounds like would be a little bit different for you having your place in the orchestra, but what has this kind of over a year long now pandemic meant for you creatively?
That's that's difficult to say. I mean, I miss the live performances, but that aside, for me it was a good year. Super strange to say that, but I had the time to make a lot of music. I had the job in the orchestra. I think I'm one of the few lucky people, and I'm trying to do the best I can. Let's say it like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, that because that's kind of
Professionally, it was a good year. Socially, it's difficult for everyone,
yeah.
of course.
That's kind of what I was wondering or thinking was that like with this pandemic, I'm imagining you guys aren't doing any really like orchestral performances. So was it then nice to kind of have the Phlocalyst project to focus on since you didn't have that performance element?
Yeah, the thing to always look forward to during the pandemic was a visit of a producer or a project to finish. Or I remember I was in quarantine for 5 days, and I was getting mad crazy for sitting inside all of the time, and I just made an album with one guy. Just because there was nothing else to do, and there was just this flow. I was forgetting about everything. That guy is called Mr. Käfer, by the way, and the album is gonna come out in summer. And the project is like this quarantine feeling, has this quarantine feeling to me, but became one of my favorite albums. I would
Awesome.
say.
Yeah. So that was something else I was wondering is like, I'm always interested to kind of, as someone who doesn't know this world at all, is how does that work like on the business side when you guys make a project together? Are you just uploading that to Spotify yourselves, or do you guys work with like a record label or record labels, or how does that work?
a lot of different record labels. There are a lot of record labels for lo-fi. And self-releasing is also possible. I would say it's good as an independent electronic musician or internet. Yeah, I wouldn't know how to call it. Producer maybe. As an independent producer, it's good to have a wide range of possibilities.
Yeah.
So see if I release there, what could happen, or who has this connection, or who can do this for me, or who likes this kind of music.
Yeah. Is that something where it's like you guys finish a project and then you talk to record labels about like them releasing it and what kind of publicity they could get for those tracks? Yeah.
Yeah, basically I think labels have a standard, every label has their own split, so percentage. Every label has their own way of making a promo for your project, and yeah, there is always a list of labels you wanna check when you have a new project. You start with one and you see, and then. Yeah.
And is part of that also like? I also imagine like with like lo-fi, as someone myself who's like, you find your favorite kind of like lo-fi playlists on Spotify or something. Is part of what the label is doing also like helping get your songs into those playlists, or do you know how that part works?
I mean, I don't know how that part. I mean, yeah. So some labels have their own playlist. They invest in their own playlist. So when you are releasing on there, they pack you into their playlist, and you get streams and plays. And yeah, there are other labels who say to have connections to editorial playlist curators. So editorial playlists are Spotify or Apple Music or Deezer, Amazon, whatever, playlists from the platform itself. And then they say, I have connection to this guy, I can send the song, maybe he likes it, and we'll pack it into the playlist. But this is not a 100% guaranteed success.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
Okay. Yeah. So it's always a bit of a gamble, especially if you're getting started with it. The longer you're in the game, or let's say the earlier you started, the better.
Yeah. So what about like this? Because you said you've been making beats for like 7 or 8 years, and then you started releasing music like 2 years ago. When was that? You said 2 years ago or 3 years ago?
So, I don't know exactly. Maybe now it's already 3 years. I thought like 2.5.
But like, so when was that switch from kind of like, oh, I'm like messing around and making stuff, to like, oh, this is something that I want to like release?
I think I wanted to release everything I made, but it was just waiting for some. If you're getting started, you don't know what you're doing. So the first question is, how would I put this music on streaming platforms? What do I do with it? And then I have written, I think, hundreds of mails to all possible YouTube channels, record labels, and one guy just wrote me back, still a good friend by the way, and I'm still working with him. He's the founder of Six Music, and Six Music wrote me back in the day that they wanted to put our album, because I made it with Lesky. They wanted to upload it on YouTube, and was just a great feeling, just to have your first couple of thousand streams on a video was mad at the time. And then they, like a little bit later, they said like, this album is working well on YouTube, let's try to upload it on Spotify and see what happens. And yeah, that's how things went.
Is it ever like crazy to you? I mean, I think I saw that like one of your top tracks on Spotify has like I don't know, like 6 million plays or something, right? Is that like, I mean, I can only relate it, which is, it's not at all in the same ballpark, but like, you know, I make like comedy sketches also. And like one of my videos hit 1,000 views, and it's like, that to me is insane. So I can't imagine, like, is that a weird idea to you that like, you know, people have listened to that song 6 million times?
No, definitely not. Okay, yeah. I mean, of course, it is special, but you have to say that a lot of these streaming numbers come through playlists. So a lot of, let's say it like this, a lot of people have heard my music maybe, but not a lot of people know who I am. And I love that about making beats and being packed in playlists. A lot of people are listening to your music in a passive way, and that's perfectly fine to me. So it's not like 6 million people know me. That's what I want to say.
But it's, I mean, to be the soundtrack in someone's life is kind of a interesting, cool thing.
Yeah, cool. It's super cool.
Yeah,
love it, definitely.
Well, so let's see if I have anything else. Okay, yeah. So two more little questions, and then we can wrap up. I want to be conscious of your time and stuff. But what is like musically inspiring you these days?
What? Didn't see that question.
Or I mean, if you don't have something off the top of your head, we don't have to go into it.
No. I have an answer. I got a vinyl player some months ago, a new one, and I'm having these wine/vinyl listening sessions with one of my best friends and producer also, Myriad is his name. And just the atmosphere and the vibe, especially during the pandemic, is something I'm also always looking forward to, and which inspires me.
That's interesting. That's like a good that's it. Like I can imagine listening to one of your songs in that exact setting. So that's and then one of the other things I wanted to ask is there a story at all behind the origin of your name?
About Phlocalyst, Phlocalyst comes from Phlocaly, which means love for beautiful things. It's like a kind of cheesy, but I liked it. And then of course it has like a flow in it, like Phlocalyst. Yeah. And it could also refer to vocalist, which I wanted to vocalize the trumpet.
And are there challenges to like making it sound right when you're adding the trumpet live over something that's produced? Was that a learning curve to?
Do you mean at gigs or in the studio or at gigs? I always say to the mixing engineers to put enough reverb on the trumpet, and then it's all fine.
And then the last question I wanted to ask was, what do you have any like hopes for the future? I mean, it sounds like in some ways you've attained a lot of your goals musically, but do you have any like aspirations or hopes for the future?
I like the way to be where I am now, even if with producing it would go it would be a little bit less one day. It's also perfectly fine, because the way to that orchestral place was just also a big struggle, I would say. And so my goal for the future is to do everything. I will never stop being productive and ambitious, but I want to do it in a way that I'm taking care of myself, and I put that in front right now. Like my own personal well-being is very important to me. So that means trying to eat correctly, doing the right amount of sports, having fun. When there's a moment to have fun, not to let it slip because there's an important gig or event taking place. Everything has to go together, and the two things shouldn't stand in the way of each other.
I love that. That's really that's really good. And I was going to end on that, but you made me think of one other thing I wanted to ask you with that, which is something I've like struggling with myself actually. With like I started making these like comedy sketches, and it's something that's fun, and then I'm also pushing myself to try to make them better and stuff. And so I was wondering if there's a balance for you where music is like your profession, but can you still just like mess around and find times to just have fun with it?
Music. Yeah, I love a sketchy jam session, just where it's like bad, and where no one cares, and you just do whatever you want. You have fun. It's not about making the best product or whatever, just about the moment. Don't record it, just enjoy it.
Yeah.
That is the time I can enjoy.
It's to me those are the moments that you like remember why you love the thing that you're pursuing so much. Yeah.
Yes, and I have forgotten that a lot of times on the way, and it's slowly coming back. It really needed time. Like after that one life goal in my mind, which is actually completely insane to live for something that's strong. On the other side, it gives you a lot too. I would never do it differently, but it's just important to remember what's good for yourself and not always put that one thing front.
I think that's a really a nice note to end on. Do you have anything else you want to add, or can you tell people where they can find you and find your music?
I think Phlocalyst will be written in the description
below.
So just hit
the link in Spotify, YouTube. I'll put all that stuff.
Exactly. Just hit up Phlocalyst on Instagram, Spotify, every platform you want, and say hi. That's
awesome. Well, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. Awesome.
Yeah, same. Enjoyed it.